The air at the summit of the Blackwood Range didn't just bite, it sang. It was a lonely, haunting melody that suited Isadora Sterling perfectly. A decade ago, she was the ice queen of the European fashion industry. Now, she was a ghost in a fortress of glass and local stone, perched on a cliffside where the clouds were her only neighbors. Isadora stood on a wraparound terrace, a silk robe fluttering against her skin, clutching a crystal glass of amber liquid. The silence was absolute until the music started. It was a violin, raw, jagged, and impossibly beautiful. She looked down toward the tree. There, bathed in the orange glow of a dying sun, was a small, colorful caravan and a campfire that defied the mountain winds. Beside it stood a man, Luka. He was a silhouette of wild curls and broad shoulders, his bow moving across the strings with a ferocity that felt like a physical touch. He was Romani, a traveler who had appeared in the valley a week ago and, for reasons Isadora couldn't fathom, climbed higher every day until he reached the edge of a private estate. Luka stopped playing and looked up. Even from a distance, Isadora felt the heat of his gaze. He didn't wave. He didn't shout. He simply picked up a single mountain wildflower he'd placed on a rock and left it there before retreating into the shadows of his caravan. The next morning, the Ice Queen found herself walking toward the perimeter fence. She found him sitting on a log, sharpening a carved wooden flute. He wore a vest of worn leather over a linen shirt, his skin bronzed by 1,000 different suns. "You're trespassing," Isadora said, her voice crisp and practiced. Luka didn't look up. "The wind doesn't ask for a passport, and the birds don't pay rent, Princessa. I am just following the music. There is no music here, only wind." Luka finally looked at her, his dark eyes sparkling with a dangerous, playful light. "Then you aren't listening. You've built a cage out of gold and glass to keep the world out, but all you've done is lock yourself in with the silence." He stood up, stepping close, too close. The scent of wood smoke, cedar, and something wilder filled Isadora's lungs. He reached out, his calloused fingers grazing the silk of her sleeve. "Every day I am here, I will bring you a piece of the world you're trying to forget," he whispered. "And every day, you will come down from your mountain to meet me." Isadora wanted to scoff. She wanted to call her security. But her heart, frozen for years, gave a traitorous, heavy thrum against her ribs. Luka smiled, a flash of white teeth against tense skin, and handed her the wooden flute. "Listen tonight. I'll be playing for the stars. And for you." As she walked back to her lonely mansion, Isadora didn't look back. But she held the flute so tightly her knuckles turned white. The romance of the mountain had begun. The glass walls of the mansion felt thinner that night. As the moon hit its zenith, the sound of the violin returned, but it was different, softer, a melodic invitation that seemed to seep through the window seams. Isadora found herself standing by the glass, her reflection a pale shadow against the backdrop of the jagged peaks. The next morning, the Ice Queen didn't wait for the sun to burn off the east. She dressed in heavy cashmere and hiking boots, her heart racing with a thrill she hadn't felt since her first runway show in Paris. She found Luka at the edge of the stream that cut through her property. He was shirtless in the biting mountain air, his back a map of corded muscle and old scars as he hauled a heavy bucket of water. He moved with a primitive grace, a stark contrast to the refined, curated men of her former life. "You're back," Luka said without turning around. "The silence was too much for you last night." "I couldn't sleep," Isadora admitted, stepping onto the damp stones. "Your music? It's intrusive." Luka dropped the bucket and turned, water glistening on his chest. He wiped his hands on his trousers and stepped toward her, his dark eyes searching hers. "Truth is a rare thing on this mountain, Isadora. It wasn't the music that kept you awake. It was the realization that you felt something." He reached into the pocket of his vest and pulled out a handful of wild berries, offering them to her. His palms were rough, stained with the juices of the earth. "In my world," Luka said softly, "we don't wait for things to be perfect. We take the sweetness where we find it." Isadora took a berry, her fingers brushing his palm. The contact felt like an electric current. She ate it, the tart flavor exploding on her tongue. "Why are you here, Luka? A man like you doesn't just wander into the private estate of a reclusive billionaire by accident." Luka's expression shifted, a shadow of something dark and ancient crossing his features. He leaned in, his voice dropping to a low, intimate rasp. "I'm a man who follows shadows. And you, Isadora, are the longest shadow I've ever seen. You aren't just hiding from a world. You're hiding from yourself." He reached out, his hand cupping the back of her neck, pulling her just inches from his face. The scent of the mountain, pine, cold stone, and wood smoke was overwhelming. "Tonight," he whispered, his breath warm against her lips, "don't stay behind the glass. Come to the fire. I'll show you what it's like to burn." He let go as suddenly as he had grabbed her, picking up his bucket and walking back toward his caravan without a backward glance. Isadora stood by the stream, the cold water rushing over her boots, feeling more alive and more terrified than she had in a decade. The sun dipped below the jagged horizon, staining the snow-capped peaks in shades of bruised purple and blood orange. For the first time in years, Isadora didn't check the closing bells of the stock market. Instead, she watched the first plume of smoke rise from Luka's campfire. She traded her silk for wool and her isolation for a path lit only by the stars. As she approached the camp, the smell of roasting meat and wild herbs pulled her back to a version of herself she thought had died in a boardroom long ago. Luka was waiting. He sat cross-legged by the flames, the firelight dancing in his dark eyes and catching the gold hoop in his ear. When he saw her, he didn't rise. He simply patted the heavy woven rug beside him. "You left the palace," he noted, his voice a low vibration that seemed to come from the earth itself. "I wasn't sure you had the courage to breathe the smoke." "The smoke is better than the stale air up there," Isadora replied, sitting beside him. The heat of the fire and the man hit her instantly. Luka handed her a tin cup of tea, thick and sweet with mountain honey. "My people believe that the mountains are the bones of the world. They don't care about your bank accounts or your broken heart. They only care if you are brave enough to exist." "And am I?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly. Luka set his cup down and turned to her. In the flickering light, his features were carved from shadow. He reached out, his hand sliding in her hair, pulling her face toward his. "You're surviving, Isadora, but you aren't living." He kissed her then, a kiss that tasted of honey and wood smoke, raw and demanding. It wasn't the polite, calculated kiss of a socialite. It was the kiss of a traveler who knew that every moment was a gift. Isadora gasped into his mouth, her hands finding the hard, warm muscle of his chest, her fingers tangling in the leather of his vest. The ice queen shattered. Luka pulled her closer, his touch possessive as he laid her back against the rocks. Above them, the Milky Way was a river of light, but Isadora only saw the fire in his eyes. "Stay," Luka whispered against her skin, his lips tracing the line of her throat. "Forget the name on the gate. Just be the woman in the mountains." But as the fire roared, a low, rhythmic sound echoed from the valley below. Not the wind, not the violin. It was the mechanical beat of a helicopter, the sound of the world she had fled, coming to reclaim her. Luka went still, his eyes narrowing as he looked toward the horizon. "They're early," he muttered, a cold edge returning to his voice. Isadora sat up, her heart plunging. "Who's early, Luka? Who is coming?" Luka stood, looking less like a romantic traveler and more like a soldier. "The people who think they own you, Isadora, and the people who know who I really am." The helicopter's searchlight cut through the mountain mist like a vengeful eye, sweeping across the glass facade of Isadora's mansion before banking toward the campfire. The roar of the rotors drowned out the crackle of the flames, shattering the midnight peace they had just built. Luka didn't panic. He moved with a cold, calculated efficiency, kicking dirt over the fire to kill the glow. Into the caravan. "Now," he commanded, grabbing Isadora's hand. "Luka, what is happening?" she cried, her voice trembling as he shoved her inside the small, wooden-walled wagon. The interior smelled of old paper, dried herbs, and gun oil. He didn't answer. Instead, he reached into a hidden compartment beneath a bench, and pulled out a high-tech, encrypted radio. He looked less like a wandering musician and more like an operative. They tracked the Sterling signal. Luka hissed into the radio, his dark eyes fixed on the door. Extraction team is compromised. I have the asset. Move to the secondary LC. Isadora froze. Asset? You call me an asset? Luka turned to her, the fire in his eyes replaced by a hard, professional glassiness. Isadora, listen to me. Your board of directors didn't just want you gone. They wanted you erased. That accident 10 years ago wasn't an accident. I wasn't sent here to romance you. I was sent to keep you alive until the hearing. The betrayal hit her harder than a mountain cold. The flowers, the music, the kisses, they were all part of a security detail. A gilded lie. So it was all a job? She whispered, her voice breaking. The Ice Queen was just a target to protect. Outside, the helicopter landed on the ridge, the downdraft shaking the caravan. Boots hit the gravel. Men in tactical gear emerged, their rifles leveled at the wooden door. Luka stepped toward her, his hand reaching for her face, his touch suddenly softening for a fraction of a second. The job was to watch you. The music, that was for me. I didn't mean to fall for the ghost in the glass house. He didn't wait for her response. He kicked open the back door of the caravan, pulling a sidearm from his waist. Run for the Trilene, Isadora. Don't look back. If you hit the old mining trail, my people will find you. And you. Luka gave her a sad, wild smile. The same one he'd worn when he first played the violin for her. I'm going to make sure they're too busy to follow. He stepped out into the blinding searchlight, his silhouette a defiant shadow against the mountain. As the first shot rang out, echoing through the peaks, Isadora realized that the man who had brought her back to life was about to give his own to keep her breathing.